Thank you so much for being here for this year's canning demonstration. My name is Brian Wells, for those of you who don't know me. I have been doing this myself personally since 2007. But I grew up in a family of canners. Really go back 4 generations that I can count, and probably back further than that. But I always like to say that I'm a 4th generation homesteader, because I definitely can trace my roots back that far. But I grew up around canning, from a very young age, eating canned food. I remember my grandparents doing a lot of canning. My mom and dad did a lot of canning. I have aunts and uncles that did a lot of canning. So this is really something that has been a part of my DNA, so to speak. But I didn't really start doing this until 2007, when my wife and I relocated back to upstate New York, which is where we live. We live about an hour north of Albany. And we moved back there. Moved in with my grandfather. It was supposed to be for 6 months. Well, we found a house. And then, if you remember back in those days, 2008 is when the housing market collapsed. And so the 6 months turned into 18 months. And that ended up really being a blessing in disguise, because through that, I really was able to get reconnected back to my roots and was able to really start learning a lot of these methods, and took over the canning from my grandfather and fell in love with it. My mom raised 3 boys, and she will tell you that out of her 3 boys, the one that she least expected to ever do anything like this was me. This was never my jam as a really bad pun, but it was never my jam as a kid. But once I discovered it, I love it, and I'm very, very passionate about sharing it with other people. Another note as well, if you were here last year, I was supposed to do this demonstration last year. I had to leave early because my mother-in-law fell ill. I had a few people ask about her. She is doing better. Had to put her into a home. But thankfully, she did survive that scare. When I got there that night, I didn't think she was going to make it through the night. But through God's grace, she's still with us. I'm very, very grateful for that. But thank you so much to all of you who were here last year. And I know you were disappointed, or some of you said you were disappointed. At least made me feel good. And thank you very much for your understanding in that. So, with all of that said, today what we're going to do is we're just going to really talk about what canning is, kind of its foundations, and talk a little bit about how to do it safely. People, I think, especially when they see this canner here, get a little freaked out, and you don't need to. They're very, very safe, and we're going to talk about how long they've been around. And so, as long as you use some common sense, really, canning is something that anybody can do. And really, what we're going to do today, I'm going to start by just demonstrating how to make strawberry jam, because it's something that is so very easy, it's so very basic. And with the exception of having canning jars, and really you don't even need those. You could make the jam, you can put it in the freezer. But if you want to can your jam, all you need is just some canning jars and lids. You don't need a canner. You don't need, a jar lifter. All of this stuff makes it much easier. You don't have to have any of that equipment. If you have a deep stock pot and some trivets to put in the bottom so your jar isn't sitting right on the bottom of your pot, you can you can hot water back jams and jellies in a regular stock pot. So you don't need any kind of, all of this equipment that I'm going to use today makes it easier. You don't have to have it to get started, okay? Now, if you want to get started doing it, then you have a lot of different options. If you want to get a hot water bath canner, that's what this is. This is kind of the old style. What I have here is a steam canner. We're going to talk a little bit about it. It actually is a steam canner and a hot water bath canner. And then if you want to kind of go into low acid fruits and vegetables, meats, those kinds of things, then you can get into pressure canning, and that's what these are. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But let's just go ahead and get started with making some strawberry jam, and then we'll talk about what canning is. So strawberry jam, very, very easy. Part of the reason why I like to do this is there's only really 3 main ingredients. We're going to use strawberries, which I've gone ahead and prepared ahead of time. We've got sugar, which I've gone ahead and measured out ahead of time. And we have a box of pectin. That's it. Now, another thing I usually use is I'll put a pat of butter in there because that'll help keep it from foaming. I didn't bring any butter with me today because I wasn't sure how it was going to handle in the heat, and I didn't want a bunch of mess all over. So we're going to go without the butter. But what we're going to do is just take this prepared strawberries. What I've done is I just cleaned them and I just mashed them up. We're going to go ahead and put them in the stock pot here. And this is where doing everything one-handed is a little bit of an adventure, but just bear with me. We're going to do that, and then we're going to go ahead and just take our pectin and put that in, and I can't do that one-handed. I should get an assistant up here is what I should do. So we're just going to go ahead and mix that pectin in. And once we get it mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the heat. I'm going to turn on the burner here. And we're going to bring this up to a boil. And as we do that, I'm just going to continue to stir it so that it doesn't scorch. Then we'll go on to the next step. This is not normally how I light a stove at home. Down just a little bit. So go ahead and just keep stirring this, and let's just talk a little bit about what canning is. So canning actually is a process that actually goes back, I think, a lot longer than people realize. It really has its foundations back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. During the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon was looking for a way to get food to his troops on the front lines that was not just dried hardtack and things like that. And so he put out a bounty, kind of did a contest looking for ways to get food to his troops. And this guy by the name of Nicholas Appert came up with a method of putting things into cans. That's why we call it canning, but canisters. And won the prize. I believe it was like the equivalent of $5,000 at the time, which would be like lots and lots of money today, in today's money. I don't know exactly how much, but a sizable amount of money he won doing that. In the mid-1800s, a guy by the name of John Mason. Anybody heard of a mason jar? He invented the mason jar. And so that really is what started the revolution or made it attainable to home use. So that was in the mid-1800s. And his method, the mason jar, the lid at the time was a one-piece lid. You've probably seen those in antique stores. It's a zinc, I think is what it was, like a zinc top type lid, but it's a one-piece lid. And so that was in the mid-1800s. Well, in the early 1900s, World War I was taking place, and a big part of the war effort was for people to plant gardens, right? And then to take that food and to harvest it and to process it. And so at that point is when there was a lot of innovation done around canning, and the two-piece lid, which is really what is the most common lid today, was invented by a guy by the name of Kerr, K-E-R-R. You've probably seen Kerr jars and lids around. He also is credited for inventing the wide mouth jar. So you could actually get your hand down in, unlike a regular mouth jar, which is a little bit harder to clean out. So Andrew Kerr invented the lids and the wide mouth jar, and around the same time is when there was a lot of research that was done, and pressure canners became popularized for canning low-acid fruits and vegetables. So up to that point, hot water bath canning was the method that was used, and that was just taking the things, putting it in jars, submerging those jars in hot water, and boiling them. That works great, and it's still a process that's used today. Works great for high acid things like pickles, tomatoes, tomato-based products, jams, jellies, like what I'm doing today. All of those are things that are great candidates for a hot water bath method. But for low acid fruits and vegetables, things like green beans, beets, or meats like beef, chicken, pork, fish, that's where pressure canning became more of a better solution. And in part, it's because of a toxin called botulism. You've probably heard of that. It exists all over the place. But it really multiplies in an environment where there is no air. And that is the kind of environment that is created when you can. That's the whole point. When you heat things up, what happens is the air is pushed out of the jar. That's what creates the seal. And that is an environment that if you don't get things up to the right temperature, can cause the botulism spores to multiply. And so pressure canning, what that does is it actually gets the temperature of the things in the jar up to a sufficient temperature to actually ensure that those things are, those bulbs are kind of killed. And so in the early 1900s, that's when pressure canning really became very, very popularized in the United States, and especially for home canning use. Now, if you fast forward to World War II, that's when we saw the biggest surge in home canned goods. Again, the war effort, plant a victory garden, that was part of your patriotic duty, was to grow fruits and vegetables and can things to preserve the harvest. And so that all kind of reached its peak in 1943. Around that time, something else happened and caused canning to really take a big, huge decline in popularity. Anybody know what that is? Freezers, home refrigeration, yeah. And so around that same time also was the popularization of convenience foods, Betty Crocker, things of that nature. And so canning really kind of fell out of vogue. And people got used to the convenience of going to the store and buying things off the shelf and buying things in bulk and putting it in the freezer. And so canning kind of took a little bit of a dip at that point. And then in the 1970s, we had the energy crisis and the back to the land movement, and there was a resurgence in popularity in canning. And at that point, there was some additional research that was done, and the idea of steam canning became popularized. But while it became popularized, it was never really approved. Now, what do I mean by approved? Because some people will talk about approved methodologies, we'll talk about approved recipes. It's not that there's any kind of canning police that's going to come lock you up and throw you away. I promise you that. Or at least they haven't come lock me up, throw me away. Maybe they're looking for me, but they haven't caught me yet. But really what that means is there's been sufficient testing done by smart people, much smarter than me, to say, hey, if you follow these recipes, if you follow these methodologies, what you're putting in the jars is going to be safe for human consumption. And that's really what it's all about. I don't want to take something and make my family sick because I didn't do it the right way. And to me, that's a waste of food, number one, but obviously I don't want to make my family sick. And so I have been somebody who, by and large, not that I'm a huge stickler that I follow everything down to the little nano, gnat's eyelash as far as everything you have to do. But I really do try to follow the rules to the best of my ability, just to be on the safe side. And so while steam canning became a thing in the 1970s, it really was not fully tested until, I believe it was 2014. There was some testing that was done by the University of Washington, and I believe it was the University of Colorado. And what they determined is that if you follow the hot water bath recipes, and you use, there's two canners that have, types of canners that have been tested, if you use those 2 canners, then the hot water bath recipes will actually work. So one of the canners is this one that I have here. It's a Harvest canner. And the other one is one that looks like, I don't know if you ever saw the cake, the metal cake carrying things that Grandma would take a cake to the church potluck. You know, it's kind of upside down. Well, it's kind of what it looks like. It's kind of a dome, about a 2-inch base to it. And you fill that up with water, and then you put the jars in it, put the dome on, and it will steam can. I particularly like this one a little bit better because this will actually work as both a hot water bath and a steam canner. And it also is a very, very nice stock pot that I've used to make chicken broth and all kinds of things in. So the difference between steam canning in this and hot water bath canning in this, and what we're doing today is steam canning, is the bottom of this, it has the rack. And if you've ever seen the rack that you use to pull the jars up in and out of your canner, in this canner you flip it upside down. So now it sticks up about 2 inches off the bottom. Your jars sit on top of that. You fill the water up to the kind of the top of that rack, and it uses less water, obviously less energy, less time, and I like all of those things. And so I really, once I discovered steam canning, I really fell in love with it, and I very rarely water bath can anything. The only reason why I water bath can anything anymore is, and now we've reached a boil here where it's not going to stir down, so I'm going to take my pre-measured sugar, and I'm just going to dump it all in one whack, bam, like that, and we're going to go ahead and stir it. And that's why when you're doing jams and jellies, it's very, very important that you have everything pre-measured, because you don't want to take time to stop and measure everything out. You want to just be able to, boom, get it right in there, and let's get rocking and rolling. So with steam canning, like I said, you can use the water bath recipes with the exception of anything that's going to take longer than, I believe, 40 minutes. And so that would be things if you were going to do quart jars of tomatoes. I believe call for longer than that. And the only reason why steam canning is not advised is because they don't want you to boil the canner dry. And so by that amount of time, the likelihood of you being able to do that is greatly increased. But other than that, your jams, jellies, pints of salsa, tomatoes, whatever, can be very easily steam canned, and it works out great, and I absolutely love it. Another reason why I like steam canning over hot water bath canning is if you have hard water, like we do, and if you were to come up here and look at some of our jars, you'll see there's like a little bit of a white film in places. That's just because of the hard water. It's not that they're dirty, it's just there's lime deposit on the outside of it. Now what you can do is you can put a little bit of vinegar in your water to help cut through that. But when you are doing steam canning, I don't have to worry about that. The jars come out just as pristine as they went in. And so I really, really like that. So for me, steam canning for low-acid fruits, vegetables, jams, jellies, pickles, those kinds of things has been something that I have really, really fallen in love with. Now, this canner is not just, some people say, well, can I just do it in a regular stock pot? Well, this is more than just a regular stock pot. In the handle of this, and I'll try to do this without getting too burnt, there is a gauge. And that gauge will tell me when it's gotten up to the proper temp. And right now it's actually the proper temp for canning. So if I had things in the canner, we would start our timer. But it does have a gauge in it to let you know at what point you should start, keeping track of things. This canner can be found on Amazon. It can be found at Layman's. I don't know, our friends in the back there at Blue Seal, they do have a lot of canning gear back there. I did not stop to look and see if they carry this. If not, I bet they could get it in for you, so stop and chat with them. But definitely can be found at Amazon, Layman's, lots and lots of different places. Absolutely love it, and so I highly recommend that if you are interested in buying the canner. It's not very expensive. I want to say it was about $75. Don't hold me to that. It may be a little bit more expensive now. But in my opinion, for getting something that can function as a stock pot, a nice large stock pot, as well as a water bath canner and a steam canner, to me it was very, very much worth the investment. Well, like I said earlier, you do not have to have a canner to do jams and jellies. As long as you have a stock pot where it's deep enough to be over top, at least an inch over the top of those jars, you're good to go. You do not need any special equipment. So, that's water bath canning. So, now let's talk a little bit about pressure canning. Now, pressure canning is the one where people get a little freaked out because those things, you know, one kind of looks like a little bit of a bomb that's ready to go off, and people are a little bit intimidated by them. You don't need to be. Like I said, this has been going on now for over 100 years. And as long as you use some common sense, you're going to be fine. So one of the things, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking water bath canning, steam canning, pressure canning, do things safely. So what I mean by that is in your kitchen, if you're canning, that's probably not the time to have your dogs running around your feet. You know, take Fido and put Fido in another room somewhere. That's not the time to have your cat running around on your counter. You know, just like put, Fifi in another room. You want to try to be as careful as possible because obviously you can burn yourself or you could burn somebody else. We don't want that. Also, if you have small children, get them out of the kitchen. I've seen pictures of kids that have pulled pots over on themselves because they were curious to what's it. We don't want that, right? So again, some of this is just simple common sense, but just a reminder that we want to try to be as careful as possible around this stuff. But another thing is simply just to be mindful of what's going on. When you're doing these kinds of things, minimize distractions. That's not the time. This is not the time to try to multitask. You really want to be focused as far as what you're doing and being present and in the moment. When you're pressure canning, the temptation may be, well, it's got to get up to temp. It's got to run for a particular time. I'm going to go take a nap. No, you don't want to fall asleep and then boil the canner dry. Let's not do that. So again, it's not rocket science, but it's just things that you think about. You don't want to take this stuff for granted because, again, we want to make sure we're doing this safely and that we don't boil a canner dry or we don't, cause some kind of injury to us or to our family. Now, what's happening right now is I've reached a point where this is not going to, as I'm stirring it, it's not boiling down, so I'm going to go ahead and start a timer here for 1 minute. And I'm just going to keep stirring as this boils vigorously here. And then after it reaches, my timer goes off, we're going to take it right off the heat. We're going to skim off the foam that's kind of generated, which it wouldn't have been as much if I had some butter in there, but I don't, so we'll take the foam off. And then we will throw this into some jars and throw it into the canner. We're not going to throw it, we're going to place it gently in there. Safety inspector over there. But we'll do that very, very carefully here. But again, just going back to just using some common sense around these things, you're going to be absolutely just fine. Some things to take into consideration is that this is altitude dependent. So the recipes generally will tell you the amount of processing time and the amount of pressure that you should be using based on the altitude where you're at. I'm going to take this off the heat real quick. So again, that's not something that we would want to do if we had little kids running around our feet. So I just try to be as careful as possible. I'm going to take this and where am I going to place this? We'll just place that in here. I'm done with that. Put it there. And now I'm going to go ahead and just take and kind of, and if you want to come up here, if anybody wants to come up and take a look, I'll show you, but it's just kind of created this froth on the top. And not that there's anything wrong with that, it just doesn't look good. So we want it to look nice, right? We're going to give this, probably going to give some of this stuff away for Christmas, you know, birthdays, Halloween. Maybe you want to pass it out to the kids. You know, maybe give them some raspberry jalapeno. That'd be a great one to give away at. Well, that'd give them a surprise. I do a lot of the things that I can. A lot of the jams and jellies I can. I give away as Christmas presents, and people lie really well, or they appreciate very much, because there is a difference in taste and texture to homemade jams and jellies. And if you've never experienced them, you're going to have an opportunity to taste some of this here in a little bit, because what I'm going to do is take one of the jars, instead of canning it, we're going to put it off to the side. I've got some saltine crackers here, and you'll be able to kind of take a taste and see what you think. What we want to do, obviously, we're going to skim this off and just trying to make it look nice from a presentation perspective if we're going to give this stuff away. So this is not something that is, again, it doesn't necessarily affect the quality of the product, but it's just for more of the visual. So let me get all of this. And this sometimes can be a little bit fiddly, and I always put it off to the side, and I just eat it, because it tastes good. Doesn't look that great, tastes good. And I don't know why, but it's like, this is something that's a little bit hard for me to, like, I can't walk and chew them at the same time, so. Trying to get this nicely done. I'm not going to focus on it maybe as much as I normally would at home, because for time's sake, but we've got a bit of it off of here, and we're just going to put that off to the side. All right, so now what we're going to do is I got some jars that I've had heating up in here. And one of the things with this, obviously always open it away from you so that you don't get a steam burn. I'm going to take that, put it off to the side just for a second. Again, this is something you don't have to have. It definitely makes life easier. We're going to take these jars that I've had heated in here out. Now, you don't have to heat them in the canner. Some people like to take their jars and run them through their dishwasher and on a sanitized cycle. Other people will take them and put them in boiling water. This is not to sanitize the jar. All right, I want to be clear about that. Some people think that you have to sanitize your jars in order to can them. You do not, if you're going to process them longer than 5 minutes. So things like jellies that you process for only 5 minutes, those jars you may want to consider boiling a little bit. But anything like jam, we're going to process for 10 minutes. So it does not have to, the jars don't have to be sanitized, because the process in and of itself is going to sanitize the jars, it's going to kill all the bad little bacteria that are in there. So we've got these jars. The reason why we heat these up, that's where I was going with this, is because what we're trying to do is stop it from creating thermal shock. So if you were to take hot jam and jelly and put it into a cold jar, you could cause the jar to explode on you, or to create a fracture, and you put it in the canner and the bottom of it blows out. And so, besides that being a lot of, you don't want broken glass around, you've just wasted all of your time, effort, and energy, and I don't like that. So, at least personally I don't, and so, again, this is part of just that canning safely piece that I was talking about. You put hot liquid into a hot jar, and that will keep it from causing thermal shock. Now, is it 100% of the time? No, especially jars that you've used over and over. At times, you know, they'll just, the bottom will blow out. They become stressed for whatever reason, and so you might get a jar that explodes in the can. You followed all of the rules, and sometimes that happens. Not the end of the world, but it is sad, at least for me, when I open up a canner and I see a jar floating in there. It makes me a little sad. So what I'm doing here, I'm just putting this into the jars, and I'm trying to bring it up to about 1/4 of an inch from the top. Now that's what's called headspace, creating headspace. That's very important because headspace, the amount of top space you have in the jar above the food, as these heat up and that air is pushed out to create the seal, you want enough space there so that you're not, the air is being pushed out, but the food isn't being pushed out. Because if the food gets pushed out, then that's going to affect the ability of the jar to seal. So your recipes should tell you how much headspace you should have. And with jam, it should be about 1/4 of an inch. Some of these are a little low, so I'll come back and I'll fill them up. Now, one of the ways that you can measure headspace is you can get a little tool like this. It's got these little teeth on it. So you've got 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, you know, on down the way. And so you kind of put this on the side of the jar and say, okay, yeah, that one's light, that one needs a little more, that one's about perfect, that one's light, and just so on and so forth. The other thing you can do, as you kind of get used to doing this, is as you look at the, what would we call these, the little screw thingies, we'll call it, on the outside of the jars, you kind of learn approximately where those measurements are. But when you're starting out, to have a tool like this just for a little bit of comfort, these are real cheap. I think I got a pack of 2 on Amazon for like $3. They're not expensive at all. But the other nice thing about these is you flip them upside down now, this little handle. You don't need to do it for jams and jellies, but if you're doing beans, things like that, where you want to be able to remove air pockets, then when you flip this over, you can kind of jam this down in and move it around and remove air pockets. So this is a really nice tool. Don't have to have this. You can use a ruler to measure. You can use a bamboo skewer to move things around. All of that works fine, but this is a nice little tool to have. I'm going to keep going here, and we're going to go up, top these off. And I think I'm a little heavy on that one, so we'll have to fix that. But it's all good. And then when we get all of these into this all into here at the levels that we want. So this one's a little light. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back through with a piece of paper towel that's wet, and I'm going to wipe around each rim of my jars, and do that for a couple of reasons. I've just pre-wet this paper towel. Part of the reason why we do that is because, take some of this excess out, we want to clean any of the food stuff that we may have gotten on the rim off so that we can create a good seal. That's part of it. But if you're reusing jars, and you should be reusing jars, if you give these away to somebody, you know, I was talking to this gentleman here, I can't remember his name, but he said John, I was talking to John earlier, he puts a little message on the bottom that says, return the jar if you want more. So to get those jars back, but definitely reuse them over and over and over again. I have jars that have been handed down to me. I have no idea who bought them. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, no idea. I know they've just been used over and over and over and over and over again. And probably some of them are worth money because there are jar collectors out there. There are people that collect anything. I collect them to use them. I couldn't care less about all that other stuff. If you love that, great, good on you. But to me, the beautiful part of canning is that you get to use these jars over and over and over again. It's a very sustainable way of food preservation. And so by taking my finger and kind of going around on the rim, if it's a jar that we've used a number of times, now these are brand new jars, so the likelihood of there being any kind of chips in them is pretty low. But if you have something that's got a little bit of a deformity, a manufacturer's deformity, where there's a little bit of an edge to it, you're going to feel that, or a little bit of a chip. Obviously, you're not going to want to try to can in that jar. Take that jar and maybe use it to drink out of, or use it to make overnight oats or something else, but don't use it for canning anymore. But that's the reason why we do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the lids on here. This is a two-handed process, so just hold on one second. Because it is a hot jar, I always like to take a hot mat, just hold it here. And then you don't want to over tighten these. So use 2 fingers, just a little bit of tightening, and then into the can. So flop it on, again, 2 fingers, and then into the can. Now, some people ask me, well, why don't you heat your lids? It used to be that it was recommended that you heat your lids. But with the newer lids, the reason why most manufacturers no longer recommend that you heat them, and part of that is because these aren't made as well as they used to make them back in the day. If you look at one of these lids, compared to an old style ball lid from like the 70s or 80s, these are nowhere near as thick, and this coating, this rubberized coating on here is nowhere near as thick either. And really the big part of the reason why they had you heat the lids back in the day was to soften that up to help make it seal better, okay? So you don't have, if you feel comfortable, if you've got a process down and you like heating your lids, you do you. But unless there's a recommendation on the box that they say preheat the lids, you don't need to do that any longer. Just right on, and again, just kind of 2 fingers, tighten it up, and we've got one more that's going to go in here, and then the rest of it we're going to save for samples here when we're done. So we're going to put these into the canner. I'm going to put my lid back on the top, and then what we're going to do is wait for that to come back off the temp, and when it does, we're going to start our timer for 10 minutes to bring it up to temp. So as that's doing that, let's go ahead and get this out real quick. Oops. There was more there than I thought. All right, that should be all right. So we're going to let that get up to temp, go for 10 minutes, and then when it gets done, we will go ahead and pull those out, and we'll take the top off, let it sit for 5 minutes, and then we will pull those jars out. So we've talked about the different styles of canning. We've talked about the different canners. Just to kind of, if you're not familiar with pressure canners, this is kind of an old style of pressure canner that has a rubber gasket in it. This canner here was one that my grandparents bought brand new in 1954. I would love to know how many thousands of jars that have been through that canner. For me, it's an honor to own that. And, every time I have an opportunity to use it, I think of my grandparents, and maybe it's a stupid notion, but I feel a connection to my heritage, and I absolutely love it. But I don't use this much anymore because I got some All-American canners. The All-American canner is a gasketless canner, so it's metal on metal. And what that means is these have a tendency to heat up and cool down a little bit quicker than, at least in my experience, than the ones with a gasket, so I can can a lot quicker with my All-Americans than I can with this one. So this canner doesn't get used much anymore. I used it all the way up until I believe it was 2017 or 2018 when I got my 921, and then I don't use this one quite as much. This canner will double stack pints. The 921 will double stack pints. This is the 930. This will double stack quarts. So this would do 19 quarts at a whack. I don't do a lot of canning in quarts. Somebody here was telling me they do a lot of canning in quarts. So if you do a lot of canning in quarts, then this really would be a great option for you. Now, they're not cheap. Brand new, I think this is about a $500 can. I did not pay $500 for this can. I was lucky enough to find it at an antique flea market thing for 75 bucks. Now, I would love to say that's what I have in it. That's not true because this lid on it is not original to the base because when this came, it came with what's called a petcock, and I wanted a jiggler. And when I was putting the pipe in for the jiggler, I screwed up, got it cross-threaded, and so I had to buy another lid, which cost me about another 100 bucks. So I'm in it for 175, but versus $500, I'll take 175 any day. And all of that simply to say that you can find these. If you look on Facebook Marketplace, I found 921. My 921 that I have, I got for 100 bucks. It's a $279 camera all day long. So keep an eye out for them. But having said that, don't let great get in the way of good enough. Okay? There is nothing wrong with a canner like this. And if that's what you can afford, then start out with that. You know, if you're just getting into canning and buying a canner and buying jars, it all adds up. So if what you can afford is to buy a Miro canner from Walmart for, I don't know what they're going for now, 120 bucks, whatever it is, if that's what's in your budget, don't let great get in the way of good enough. Those canners are serviceable, they work great. There's also places like Denali Canning that have good canners. 4 Jars is another one, so look out for them. But then don't forget our friends back at Blue Seal. They also sell canners, and so make sure you stop by and see them and see what they have to offer. They're not selling anything here today, but you can stop into their stores and they will hook you up, I am sure. So the different canners, let's talk a little bit about jars. So in the realm of jars, this lineup here is pretty much the standard jars that you will find in the stores. You'll find some fancy jelly jars that are maybe a little square, a little squattier, but they're an 8-ounce jelly jar, which is this jar right here. This is a 4-ounce jelly jar. These are really great, again, if you want to do small samplers to give away to your family and your friends. Things like, again, jams, jellies, chutneys, hot sauces, mustards, like all of those kinds of things, great for that. This is a great, jams, jellies, all the same things that I just mentioned. So stepping up to that. Then you get into your pint jars, and your pints really come in, generally speaking, 2 configurations. You have your regular mouth jars, and you have the wide mouth jars. And really, which one you use doesn't matter. It's really a lot of it is personal preference. Some of them work better for certain things. So if you're trying to keep something submerged under a brine underwater, sometimes using the regular mouth jar is going to work a little better because those shoulders are going to help out keeping things underneath the water. But I use these interchangeably all the time. I don't really think too much about it. Sometimes it's a matter of what lids do I have, what bands do I have available at the time, and then I make a determination as far as what I'm going to use. On your quart jars, so your quart jars, again, regular and wide mouth jars, and those are, again, great for if you want to do beans in large quantities or tomato sauces in large quantities. A lot of it has to do with canning for how you eat. So how many people are in your household and how much do you normally consume at a normal sit-down meal? For my wife and I, it's just the 2 of us now. Our son's gone off to college, and so we're living that empty nest life, which is glorious. Don't let my son know that, but no. But when it's just the 2 of us, we don't generally eat a quart of green beans at a time. So I don't generally can in quarts for green beans or beets. I can those in pints. And, my rationale on that is if we have people over, then I just grab 2 pints of beans instead of having a pint of beans or a quart of beans and then some of them go bad because we didn't eat all of the beans. So again, it's just a matter of how does your family eat? What are the things that your family eats in quantity? and what are things that your family eats maybe a little bit less of. For us, really the only thing that I use quart jars for anymore, I do juice in my quart jars, so I like to make grape juice, cranberry juice. There's a really easy recipe, and don't hold me to the ratios, but it's like you put a couple of grapes in with a half a cup of sugar, and then you top it off with boiling water, and you process it for a period of time. Makes great grape juice, makes great cranberry juice, and it's really easy. Now, it's not as rich as if you steam it and put it through a juicer, then you get a thicker juice and that kind of stuff, but we really like doing juice that way. I also use my quart jars to can meats, in particular bone-in chicken. So for us, what we do with our layers, when our layers get to the spot where they're no longer laying well, I'm not running a retirement home for layers. And so my layers, when they get done laying, then they provide me with sustenance. And so what we do with them is we dress them off. They go into my jars bone-in with no juice or anything like that. It makes its own juice. And it is some of the best tasting chicken you'll ever have in your life. And we use it for things like chicken tetrazzini or chicken and biscuits, chicken stew, those kinds of things. When you open up a can of that and the bone, it just falls right off the bone. But it is it's so tender, and it's like the chickeniest chicken that I've ever had. Tastes great, and so we do that in quart jars. Now, this is a half gallon jar. Half-gallon jars are not really approved. Remember I said that, I used that word before. But they're not really tested for much canning. I think there are two things that they're approved for, and I believe it's grape juice and apple juice to can in half-gallon jars. So I don't can in half-gallon jars. Half-gallon jars at my house are used for things like fermentation. And in fact, that's what, if you come back tomorrow, come to my fermentation class, and here is some fermented hot pepper sauce. So that's jalapeno garlic. I ferment that in I'll ferment those in half-gallon jars. Now, I also use quart jars, and we're going to make a batch of sauerkraut tomorrow in a quart jar. I actually have a batch of sauerkraut in a quart jar that I made last week that we'll be able to taste test tomorrow for those who are brave enough. But the half-gallon jars are more for dry goods and fermentation, that kind of thing. That's how I use them. Again, I don't can half gallons of juice at a whack. I can quarts of juice at a whack. That's just what I do at my house. So we're still on a temp here. I should have put that cover back on while I was blabbering, but then we'll get back up to temp. So that is the jars. One more thing before I take some questions here. There is a brand of jar called Weck. I don't know if you've ever seen those Weck jars. You may have seen like the old school jars with the glass lid and the bail that kind of goes up over those. Well, Weck jars are kind of a take on that because they have a rubberized gasket that they use and then a glass top. I've never used them. I know people that use them and love them. I just have never used them because what we've always used has been the two-piece lids, and if it's not broke, don't fix it. You can get reusable lids that are designed to be reusable. Harvest Guard makes them, Tatler makes them. Those are the two big ones. So it's a plastic lid with a rubber gasket that works with these types of jars. I've never used them. I know people that use them love them, but I just have never used them. There's always questions with regards to can you reuse your lids. I personally don't reuse my lids. And the reason why I don't reuse my lids, is because the lids of today are not the lids of yesterday, as I mentioned earlier. These are a lot flimsier lids, and so there's a lot more opportunity when you take them off to damage them. Also, that rubberized coating is not as thick as it used to be on the older lids. And so, for me, it's not so much a matter of safety, it's a matter of I really don't want to risk having bad seals and losing product because that lid was a little tweaked in some way, fashion, or form. And so, for me, I personally just choose not to reuse lids. I use a lid one time and I get rid of it. But I know people that reuse lids, they have a good time doing it and they have success. There are some newer manufacturer lids that are making them in the United States. One that I've been using recently is Superb. They actually have a blue rubber gasket on them, thick. Those lids are really nice and thick. I'm loving those things right now. And they're not paying, they're not supporters of this event, but I'm just going to tell you a little secret here. Close your eyes back there, Blue Seal. Close your ears. But there's a place online called Dutchman's where you can order those lids in bulk, cheaper than you can get them through Superb themselves, which blew my mind. So, yeah, they're a great lid. Highly recommend them. I'm loving them right now, and so definitely check them out. The Dutchman's General Store out of Iowa or Idaho. But no, I don't know. Check back there with the people at Blue Seal. I don't know if they deal in Superb. Maybe they can get you a great deal on it. No idea what they've got in stock back there. But I really, really love those lids. So, while we're waiting for this to get up to temp, come on now. I have it. I got it as high as it. No, I did not have it as high as it'll go. I had it. Look, that's why I was here at the temp. So let's see. Let's take questions. What we got time-wise? Have I talked too long?
21.
So I got 9 minutes, right? I began an hour. So.
No, you get an hour and a half, I believe.
I mean, I can talk all day, but I don't want to bore you.
No, technically 2:30.
2:30, okay.
But the next event's not until 3.
Okay, so I'll talk for another 10 minutes. I'll answer questions, and you can come up and you can taste test, and I'll answer. I'll stick around and answer any questions you have. Also, my email address, if you want to jot it down, available any other questions, brian@thehomesteadjourney.net. You can reach out to me. More than happy to help you out. All right, so questions. What do we have? Anybody? Listening.
What's your favorite thing you can?
My favorite, absolute favorite thing you can. Great question. I absolutely love making jams and jellies. There's something about stirring that pot, and I just find it very, very cathartic. But I love doing jams and jellies. So, particularly jams. Jellies is a little more fiddly, but I still like making those as well.
When you can your layers, do you add water or anything, or do you just dry can?
So my chicken, yeah, no. When I do my layers, and actually even when I do like beef for stew meat, that goes right into the can with no. I don't put any liquid in, and it generates its own juice. So boneless is a little different. You just need to check your recipes for processing times because you process bone-in longer than you do boneless. I believe bone-in. I could have that backwards, but just check the recipes. I don't remember off the top. I could look it up here. I got my little booklet. That's something else. Highly recommend having a good canning book in your kitchen because when questions like this pop up, you can just pop in and take a look. So let's see what we got.
I know it's 90 minutes for court for
Chicken. All right, so this says process quart jars of bone-in poultry for 75, boneless for 90. So you're right, that backwards. So, but that's why I always do anytime I always refer to my canning Bible. And you can see this has been worn and it's stained and it's well loved. Yes, well loved. You got a question over here?
Yes, you buy
I honestly don't know. You'd have to check them out. I know, I'm pretty sure if you buy in bulk, you'll get a better deal. I mean, you probably could go to Superb and buy by the pallet. If you had a bunch of friends that are canners, I know of people that will actually buy jars by the pallet and then split them up. Yeah, you buy them by the pallet and use them yourself, but get them back. Yes, sir.
Have you ever used pumpkin? Is there anything special?
That's a great question. So pumpkin is one where if you can pumpkin in chunks, it's approved. But there is currently, as far as I know, no quote-unquote approved method of canning pumpkin puree. And the reason why is because the viscosity of pumpkin puree is such that there's concerns as to whether or not the heat can penetrate far enough into the jar to kill all of the bacteria. So pumpkin puree is something that is not recommended to be canned. So that's one that I would just say throw in the freezer. But you can can chunks of pumpkin and puree it afterwards if you want. And that would work out fine. And that is definitely approved methodologies. Any other questions? Yes?
I was curious about which pectin, liquid pectin, powdered pectin, or the calcium activated pectin, what's your
So, that's a great question. Personally, I use this, the Sure Gel. We're not quite up to temp. I use Sure Gel for this demonstration. And this is what I used to use all of the time when I first started canning. Nothing wrong with this, I love it. I never personally had good luck with Sure, so the liquid pectin. It just never firmed up well enough for me. It always felt like my jams and jellies were running. And so, from a preference perspective, I've always used this. However, last year I discovered that I could buy pectin in bulk. And so I bought pectin in bulk. Now, I think a 2-pack of these cost me $6.50 at Walmart, for over to that, and I think that's about what they're up to now. I bought a whole tub of pectin from off of Amazon. I'm sure you probably can get it on the stores, all kinds of places, but I got it off of Amazon. I think it was $16. I have made 16 batches of jam and jelly out of that. I make a little tick on it every time for $15. So quite a bit of cost savings there versus if I were to buy those. So I guess the answer to your question is I prefer the powdered pectin, but I have moved to buying it in bulk personally. Now there are a lot of people that I know that don't like to use pectin at all. And you don't have to use pectin. You can the fruits have natural pectin in them, and you can also kind of juice up the natural pectin by using like green apples, things like that. But it just means you've got to cook things down farther. You have to have more fruit. So it takes longer, it takes more fruit. And so personally, I use the regular pectin. One other thing about pectin, you do want to make sure that you follow the rules or the recipe on your boxes, because this is kind of a scientific thing from the standpoint of the amount, the ratio of sugar to pectin, to ensure that it gels properly and also that it's cooked for the proper amount of time. So to make sure that your jelly and jam isn't too runny and it's not too hard. But you can get, if you're somebody who's diabetic or have family that is, definitely then think about doing the regular or the natural pectins and cooking things down with less sugar. You can also buy a low sugar pectin as well. Yes, ma'am.
What's your favorite jam recipe?
My favorite jam recipe? I love simple. And so, honestly, I follow the Sure Gel jam recipes almost to a T. Even though I'm not using Sure Gel pectin, I figured out what the ratio is to mash. But this here was, I believe, 5.5 cups of, and we're up to temp, so I'm going to start my timer here. It was 5.5 cups of strawberries. It was 7 cups of sugar and 1 box of pectin. And it makes it very, very delicious. And not that I'm bragging here, but I'm going to brag a little bit. At the Washington County Fair in upstate New York, I did win the blue ribbon this year in strawberry jam. And I've actually, think every year that I've entered my strawberry jam, I've won the blue ribbon. So I'm pretty proud of that because that's a big category. But it's really my secret is just that I follow the sugar gel recipe. I mean, it's not really rocket science. Now, anybody here from Washington County? Because I'm going to zap you, so you forget what I just said. I'm sorry. The meats that I can, we have canned beef, chicken, and pork. That's what we've personally canned. My brother cans, he lives up in Alaska, they can salmon, they can fish. But you can can pretty much any meat. Just look for a recipe for it. One other thing as far as the safety perspective. Again, I'm somebody I like to follow approved recipes. So be careful, just because somebody has a blog and has a recipe out there doesn't necessarily mean you should follow it. Personally, I try to steer clear of those, but there are a couple of online resources that I do recommend. It is the Home Center for Food Preservation, which I believe is connected to the University of Georgia. That's one. Also, the Ball, your big name companies, Ball, Sure Gel, things like that. Those are tested recipes. So just be careful going online and looking for a recipe. Definitely, I recommend sticking, especially if you're getting started. Find this book is great. I love it. There's the Ball Blue Book of Home Food Preservation. That's another great one. I think they might have some back there. If they don't, I'm sure they can get them in. So check with Lucy and see what they can conjure up for you if you're looking for those. Obviously, you can find those on Amazon as well. Yes. If you're doing more than 5 minutes, so any jams, jellies, that's going to take 10 minutes of processing time. Maybe something fast. Any other questions before I send you forth? If anything pops up, send me an email, or if you see me knocking around here, just pull me aside. I'm glad to talk about it. This is something like I said, I'm very passionate about. I love sharing this knowledge with people. Hopefully you found this helpful, informative. And thanks so much for being here. Tomorrow I'm talking about fermentation as another means of home food preservation. So if you're interested in that, and I didn't bore you too much today, I'd love to see it. Thanks so much for being here.